Hello, world. This is Kevin from Fiction Factory, and you're listening to DC and DH on the D&D Dynamite 80s podcast.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into another episode of D&D Dynamite 80s. I'm DH.
I'm DC.
DC, how are you, brother?
I'm doing fine, man. Busy as always.
Busy. Another good week going.
Got that right.
A lot of good things going. Got a great guest today. I'm really excited
Absolutely.
about this. Something you and I
Absolutely.
have kind of talked about on our own, and I'm really excited to get this going. So without further ado, I'm going to let you introduce our guest, and we'll get this one rolling.
Yeah, we have Jaime Kay with us. She's the host on the podcast. I want to make sure I get this right. Life and Laughs in the Jungle Room.
Yes,
There
a
you
very
go.
long title.
Yeah. So we'll start out by kind of let everybody know what the podcast. I've heard it. It's tremendous.
Yes. Very
So
much.
give us a rundown of kind of how I got started and all that good stuff.
Well, back in 2018, I was still in radio and I had been wanting to do a podcast. And I was talking to my mom, and she was an avid Elvis fan, and I have been my entire life. And at the time, I was doing a little show with someone else in the radio station, and he was a big Elvis fan. So we just thought, let's combine it. My mom said, oh, an Elvis podcast would be wonderful. No one's doing that. At the time, it wasn't that many. And we started with just little 15-minute episodes. It was called the Jungle Room Podcast. And we did that for about a year. And then I started getting interviews, and I started making it a lot longer. Back in August, I merged with the Life and Laughs podcast, and we put our two podcasts together. And now it's Jaime Kay and Johnny Sanchez. So we've kind of rebranded ourselves. We're still in the process of finding a logo and doing all those fancy things.
Yeah.
But right now the merge is still kind of a work in progress, and we're trying to find our footing. But so far it's working.
Awesome.
It's really cool to hear that, because we actually, we grew up together, and now we teach together and all. And we just started this kind of as something fun to do.
About a year ago.
Yeah, and it's
coming up
amazing
on a
how
year.
much it's grown, and how much, I think how much better we've got. We're still not good, but we're getting better.
No, we're not.
Well,
We're
I
far
have
from
to tell
being
you
good.
guys- Well, I have to tell you guys, I listened to your show, a few of your episodes today, and I really enjoyed it. I
Awesome.
really
Well,
like
thank
you guys. So you are now on my podcast list.
Oh, well, thank you.
Awesome.
We appreciate that.
Awesome.
Awesome.
All right, here's what we got that we kind of came up with the idea. If Elvis would have been able to perform in the 80s, what kind of response would the kids of that age give him? And so I've got a little bit that we can kind of play off of. In 1980, Elvis would have been 45 years old. Okay. During 1980, Michael Jackson, of course, Bob Seger, Pink Floyd, Queen, Air Supply, Billy Joel. Those were kind of some of the top names of that actual year.
Right.
So starting out, guys, what do you think with that rundown? If he was in performance kind of condition,
Here's kind
What
of
are you
where
thinking?
here's kind of where I would go with that, and I'd love to see your opinion
Yeah.
on this, Jamie. I'm kind of wondering, would he go more the route of like the Johnny Cashes and Conway Twitty's of his time,
Yes, sir.
or would he kind of venture more to the Frank Sinatra type performances?
Hmm.
I'm kind of wondering.
I feel like Elvis, and again, this is all our opinions. We don't know.
Sure.
But what we do know is that Elvis was notorious in recreating himself. In the 50s, he was the young rock and roller, the rebel. The 60s, we saw the Hollywood Elvis making the movies. And then in the late 60s, 70s, we got the Vegas Elvis and the concert jumpsuit Elvis. So what I have said, and I've talked about this on my show, I have always seen Elvis probably being one of the highwaymen with Chris Christopherson, Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson. I'm forgetting one.
Willie,
The other one. Willie Nelson.
Johnny Cash.
Yeah. I could see him going that way.
Yeah.
Because those were the guys that he kind of got famous with.
Right.
And I see him doing that. I also could see him being in, remember the song in the 80s, We Are the World?
Right, yes, yep.
See
I
him
could
being a
see
part of
that.
that too.
But
But I do also see, as we get in the later 80s, I could see him going back to Vegas and doing more of a Frank Sinatra thing. I don't think Elvis would have, as he got into in the 80s, he was mid 40s into his 50s. I don't think that I think he would continue to recreate himself until he retired, if
I
he
kinda-
retired.
I
Yeah.
kind of wonder, because something you just brought up there kind of sparked this. I kind of wondered if he would kind of be like the male version of Dolly Parton, kind of continually recreating, reinventing, staying on that kind of that cusp of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
modern
Good
that's going
point.
on.
Yeah, I can see that. I do, because you also have to remember Elvis, especially even in the 70s, he was still trapped. He felt like he couldn't go out in public. I think that would probably have died down a little bit because, we got those new entertainers coming in the 80s. The fans are getting older. The young kids are listening to, their genre of music.
Right.
So he would have had to recreate himself. And I think that the Elvis of the 80s would not have been what we had seen in the 70s. I think I would like to say that I would like to think that he would have gotten a good movie role. Gotten into that. But
Right.
I've always said I could have seen him being one of the highwaymen and like getting a really good meaty movie role.
Yeah.
I kind of agree with
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And I also wonder what your thoughts on, because when Elvis started, he was kind of that cutting edge rock and roll, kind of that heavier type music in that time frame. I wonder what his perception would have been of when the hair metal revolution kind of came around, because he was kind of that stylish, hip, hard
Yeah.
rock type thing. And just to kind of think about that in the 80s, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah, that is it. Is to see what Elvis would have thought of Kiss.
Yes.
Exactly.
And Warrant and all of that, Bon
Yeah.
Jovi.
I mean,
Yeah.
because if
Yeah,
you,
that
hair
would be
bands,
interesting
yeah.
because they were rebels. The hair bands and the rap stars of the 80s. They were rebels in their own right.
right,
The
and it-
kids
true.
of that day were gravitating towards them because of what they represented. And I think Elvis would have respected that. I
do
would
too.
like to think that he wouldn't have ended up being like, a conservative grandpa.
Right.
Those darn kids these days. I would like to think he would have embraced those changes
I believe he would have. Yeah.
yeah,
and counseled the new and upcoming stars, because there's a burden when you get famous that fast and that quickly. I would like to think that he would have counseled and he would have supported them. May not have liked their music, but he would have understood the youth
Well-
of that generation going that way.
I can kind of even see some of his influence in some of those bands. If you look at his charisma, his stage presence, his costumes he wore, kind of that, he was really a showman, so to say, in his concert. And you see that in the hair metal bands. It's more about, I mean, it is about the music, but it's more about the show too. And I kind of wonder how many of the hair metal bands he actually influenced those musicians.
Oh,
That would be
absolutely.
Well,
interesting.
you think about the Rolling
question.
Stones. I mean, who started wearing the jumpsuits? Elvis or
Right.
the Rolling Stones? I mean,
Exactly.
Elvis was an innovator.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I'm kind of like you. I think he may not have cared for their music, but I think he would have supported their genre and their
Respected it.
actual
Sure.
passion for what they were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. 1985. So we'll go to the middle of it. He would have been 50 years old.
I can feel his pain.
Yeah, I hear you. It's coming closer, man. Yeah. Madonna, REO Speedwagon, Hall and Oates, Wham. I don't think any competition for Wham. I don't think they would have been able to give it to
Hey
him.
now, come on, George.
Foreigner
George
and
is
Bruce
great.
Springsteen. Now that is interesting.
Yes.
And Bruce Springsteen is a big Elvis fan.
Yes, he is.
Yes.
Yeah, and he was
Oh.
in the Elvis fan club, and he said that he was inspired by Elvis Presley.
Absolutely.
And
So-
I think you can see that in his shows, because if you think about Springsteen, now, I mean, I haven't seen him in years,
Right.
but when he hit the stage, you could see
Some of
that
the same
passion,
kinda
you could see that
exactly.
showmanship and the music, and he was into it. I mean, he
Mhm.
put everything into it.
That's
So,
right. That's right.
Do you see Bruce Springsteen and Elvis doing a duet?
Oh, how cool would that be?
Wouldn't that have been awesome?
How cool would that
Prince.
have been? Yes, our Prince.
Prince.
Yes. Oh, wow.
That would have been.
That would have been really cool.
Yes.
Think about all the crossovers. Who was it? Was it? It may have been Dolly Parton that did kind of the crossovers with some of the pop stars. I can't remember, but I'm thinking. But think about.
Well, she did. Well, Whitney Houston recorded "I Can't Help." I Will Always Love You.
Right. Right.
But I think a lot of Dolly's songs have been covered by pop artists.
Right. Kind of covered over, and I mean, just imagine the duets that Elvis.
I think some
did.
of that would have took place
Wouldn't
with
that be
him.
cool? Could you imagine,
Yeah.
like you said, him and Bruce Springsteen?
I
Wow,
could
that's
see
a
that
concert.
happen. Yeah.
I would pay for that concert today
Oh yeah,
in
absolutely.
a heartbeat.
Yeah, I could see that happening.
Yeah.
And think about, Prince and his stage presence, who also wore jumpsuits too, by
Yes.
the way.
Exactly.
Could
Yeah.
you see them at an award show, Prince
Wow.
and Elvis Presley?
How
That
amazing
would
would
have
that
been
be?
historic.
Prince
Yeah.
in his purple jumpsuit, Elvis in his
Right.
white jumpsuit. How
Right.
amazing would that be?
Yeah,
That would be
that would have
cool.
been good
That
stuff.
would be cool.
Do you think Elvis would have continued to wear the jumpsuits in the 80s? I hope not, but what do you think?
Being a guy that's now 54 myself and knowing what's occurred in the years that's passed for me, I would hope not. I wouldn't wear a jumpsuit. But I mean, maybe he would have got back into, who knows? I mean, look at some of these performers that would have been the same age as Elvis now are in pretty good shape, so hopefully
Mhm.
not though.
Yeah, yeah. The jumpsuit I couldn't see happening. No.
I should
No,
see the
I mean, it was starting to get a little redundant.
Yeah, I should get
But
one
I
as
think that makes
jumpsuit and
sense.
wear it our next show.
That's
I
what you
should do that. Wear it for the next
Yeah, there you go.
video.
Oh, you have all the fun with that you want.
I don't think they make them that
No,
big.
no. Now, speaking of age 54, which we are, he would have been that in 1989 to finish out the decade. Okay. Now, I want to tell you this, even at 54, if he would have been in pretty good condition, pretty good health, still in the public eye, doing his deal, a show of some sort, or doing some concerts or whatever, here's the competition he would have had. And I don't think it's very tough competition. Here's some of the main ones in 89 that I looked up. And nothing against them, because I enjoy several of these that are on here. I'm just talking about with comparison with Elvis.
Mhm.
You got Chicago, Poison, Janet Jackson, Richard Marx, Debbie Gibson, and Bobby Brown. Those were some of the top names in 89.
Wow.
Compared to Elvis, even at 54. Now that would be an interesting conversation.
Yeah. You know what's also interesting and important to note, being 54 in the 80s and 54 in the 70s is not like being 54 today. 54 is the new 34.
That's a great point.
We are a lot younger
Yeah.
than the way we eat, the way we look. I mean, it's just a different
Great point.
of lifestyle. So being 54 in 1989, Elvis would be older.
Yes.
And I don't think he would look at them as competition. I think they would just be again, he is now an old timer.
Right.
And he would have kind of gone that way of Johnny Cash, Frank Sinatra. And I think he wouldn't even be trying to compare himself to Bobby Brown or Chicago.
Right, that's kind of where I think.
That's a
too.
good
But I
point.
do have a question. I'm going to lean over one way or the other, but you can see I had hair when I was young, like Elvis. I wonder if his hair would look like mine now.
Probably.
You think Elvis would have gone bald?
I don't know. I couldn't imagine Elvis being bald. I just
Can't imagine that either.
I could not.
I have to put that in perspective for a second. No, I can't either.
I really can't.
I hadn't thought about that, but yeah,
I think
Elvis baldhead.
No.
I just know. I think
Because that was one of the key things that people just admired was like, oh man, the hair. A lot of people,
Hair.
that was one of the, ongoing
Yeah.
things that was
I don't-
very well known.
I
for
just
him.
couldn't imagine him being bald.
No, I
could
couldn't
not.
either.
I can't either. I don't think Elvis, as vain as Elvis was, if he had gone bald, I think he would have spent a lot of money on very realistic wigs and
Yes.
hair plugs or just never left his house, which he didn't really do that much anyway, unless it was like 2 o'clock in the
I
morning.
bet you're
But
right. Yeah. Yeah.
He would never have just gone bald
Really would have been
naturally.
recluse then. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think my big thing, this whole thing, when we first started talking about this, and I mean no disrespect, great performers, but a few years back when the Rolling Stones played the Super Bowl, I was kind of like, it's probably time for you
I
to
remember
get off the stage. And I don't think Elvis would have put himself in that position because he was so great at marketing himself.
Mhm.
I just have to wonder at what point would he kind of.
So you're saying he probably wouldn't maybe got to 54?
No, I don't know. No, I'm talking about
Like performing
yeah,
wise?
yeah. I don't know that he would necessarily be out trying to do major performances
Gotcha.
at 54. I think maybe the
Yeah.
Las Vegas thing, like you said, doing the show in
Smaller
Vegas or
groups,
something.
smaller performances.
Because I
Performing
just
to his demographic of fans
Right.
that were never going to go away.
That would make sense.
Right.
Yeah,
That would
there's
make sense.
always an opportunity. Yeah, there's always an opportunity to get new fans in a younger group. I mean, I love
Sure.
Frank Sinatra.
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
I love Elvis. I mean, I was only 8 months old when he died, so I never saw him perform live or anything like that. So there's always that you can get new fans. You're going to always try to introduce yourself to a new group, a new group of people, a new generation, if you will. But you also can't forget the people who have followed
Right.
you all of those years and put you in that position. So I think Elvis would have had that in his head, and he would continue to perform in that way of Frank Sinatra and to reinvent himself. That's why I say the highwayman, that going that route,
Right.
because you think about it, Willie Nelson, Johnny Cash, they and the others that I'm forgetting right now, but they were that age and they had done the 50s rock and roll in the 60s, and then them coming up with something like that put them right back on the map.
Yeah.
And I was a
even-
little kid and I loved the Highwayman.
And
So
even with the rebranding, even to this date, if you look, and speaking of Elvis kind of doing something like the Highwayman, I mean, you look at Willie Nelson right now, he does those cameos in commercials and things like that. And everybody's like, oh, look, it's Willie, you know? So I'm kind of like you. I
Still
think
in the
Elvis
eye
would
of
have been
the-
able,
yeah.
because he was, I mean, let's face it, he was an innovator, but he was a master at rebranding himself and staying fresh.
oh, yeah.
So I think he would have found those ways to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe
And look at
smaller.
Diane Hard and Willie Nelson. I
Yeah.
mean, I have a 20-year-old and a 22-year-old son, my two boys. I have two girls too, but the two boys love Willie Nelson.
Yeah.
And they're 20 and 22. So they're yeah, he would have
Yeah.
still gained new fans, a younger generation, not on the big scale as it was in the 50s, but when you're good, you don't stop being good when you get older.
That's
And
it.
that talent is still in there. You go back to that 1977 CBS special, and
Yes.
as bad as he looked, he did look bad. If you listen, especially to the song Hurt and some of those ballads, his vocals were still so strong.
Yes.
And he was
Classic.
still a performer. And I
Yep.
think that he would continue to be just like that.
I will never forget. We were probably what, 11, 12. And we were actually, I don't know if you were there or not, but we were out playing football and mom called us all in because it was breaking news that Elvis had passed.
Yep.
And then they played his concert, his last concert
Yep.
that night.
A
And
couple
did.
weeks later.
yeah, and it was just like, it's just like the world stood still for that moment. Because everybody, all of us, I mean, a group of, I mean, you take 12 or 15, 12-year-olds, and we're just like, we can't believe it. That's how much of an influence he was.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Couldn't imagine him, being
Yeah.
without him.
No, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
So, but you did say something real important that I think we need to key on. See, if we ever get good at this podcast and stuff, we need to learn how to transition things like that. See, we might get
There you
good
go.
one day, but I doubt it.
I doubt it. You're right. Yeah. Yeah. Very amateur here. Yeah.
But
Hey,
so are we. Start to.
let me ask this.
I mean, as you can see, that's my very nice little backdrop that I got back here.
Well, we're ghosts here.
Yeah, so I keep
we do in
disappearing.
and out of
I
it.
see
so.
your body keeps like going away.
Look, I can be a floating head.
We're here to help
Hey,
entertain.
it's all good.
Yeah, yeah. So, hey, let me ask this. As I listen to some of your podcasts,
Oh, they're good.
oh,
Really
they
good
very,
folks.
very good. I want to know this from would Priscilla be probably one of the biggest highlights of your interviews?
Priscilla definitely is probably the number right up there. But I think back in August, I had the honor of interviewing Ginger Alden on stage for her event,
Oh,
An Evening
wow.
with Ginger Alden.
Yes.
So I had the event was supposed to be in 2020, but because of COVID, they postponed it to 2021.
Okay.
And I was for a year, I spoke to Ginger regularly preparing for this event. I would say talking to her and getting to know what Elvis was like those last 9 months, and it was to me just such an honor and a blessing, because I had this thought that Elvis was this overweight, sick, depressed individual those last couple years of his life. And Ginger says that is not true. There were times he was a 42-year-old man. He wasn't in his 20s anymore. There were times where, because of his diet, he would be more bloated than normal, but he wasn't this heavily obese person that the tabloids made him out to be. And I thought that was eye-opening and riveting, because he had became almost like a caricature, if you will, of who he used to be,
Yep.
And to hear her say that, no, that was not him. He was not depressed. He was, looking forward to getting married in his future. And, and I wonder, had Elvis had lived, how more of those tabloids, those articles that were so offensive because he was getting older and he wasn't that young Elvis. I wonder if that would have continued or if it would have just dropped off.
That's a great point. That's a great point. I mean, and I think part of that is, I mean, the way I kind of look at that with those tabloids is, you still have that much of a present that they're trying to do stories on you, albeit they're trying to be negative about you and be spiteful. But you know what? You're still influencing because they're still talking about you.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the higher you go, the further you have to go down. And people, they'll elevate you, but they'll also be the ones that will bring you down. And I think Elvis he was a force to be reckoned with. There's never going to be anyone like Elvis.
No.
And he, not in our lifetime.
No.
And I think, that's just the way the way we are, the world at large, is that we're going to take our idols, we're going to love them, we're going to lift them up, but we're also going to be part of bringing them down. And we're all guilty of it. The people that buy the tabloids, the people that read it and report it. It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
See, that's the good thing for us. We stay on that first step. We ain't got far to fall.
We don't make it to the first step.
No, we still got our leg up trying to get there.
Yeah, there you go. Have you met and talked or interviewed or whatever with any of the relatives?
I have met Billy and Joe Smith. I have met both of their sons, Danny Smith and Joey Smith. Mm-hmm. I have met Marty Lacker's daughters, Sherry Lacker and Angie Lacker.
Yep.
I've interviewed Charles Stone, who was one close to Colonel Tom Parker. I feel like when I start doing this, I feel like I'm going to forget someone.
Sure.
Because I'm almost 50, so like my memory is like not as good anymore. Oh my goodness. I know I'm forgetting a few people, but I'm sorry. But Priscilla and Ginger are probably my top.
There you go.
But I really enjoyed talking to Billy and Joe Smith. This was back during Elvis week. We were at Marlowe's and I was sitting across from Joe and Billy, and they were so kind and lovely to me and so gracious. They allowed me to ask questions. I didn't record it or anything. It was just dinner.
Yeah.
And and I was just so comfortable with Joe Smith that, some people would have probably been, offended by some of my questions. But, these books and everything's out there, and you have someone right there in front of you who was there. How could I not ask?
Right.
Exactly. Right.
She was there. But they were very lovely, lovely people.
Great. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank
We had a blast. Let everybody know
Yes.
how to get a hold of listening to your stuff? Yeah.
Well, you can hear our show Life and Laughs in the Jungle Room
Yep.
on any podcast platform. But to make it easy, you can go straight to jungleroompodcast.com. And we have all of our episodes and our videos from our YouTube channel and our old episodes from before the merge. You can find it right there, jungleroompodcast.com. Oh, and every Friday night, not every Friday night, but most Friday nights, I do a Friday night live on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Where I would interview people like yourself, and we would have
Awesome.
discussions just like this.
So,
Awesome.
so now, kind of in closing, first off, thank you for taking your
Yes.
time today. We really appreciate you taking the
Yeah,
time.
thank you for having me.
And I would just like to say now, and you can go ahead and agree. I know we can't beat out your top 2 favorite interviews, but we could be number 3, or at least in the top 12.
Exactly.
I
Top
would
12,
really like
top
to have
20.
you guys on. I think if you guys are up for doing a live show, I think it would be fun
Oh.
to do a live with you too, and we can we can make this discussion a
Yeah.
little longer.
We would love to.
I
You
absolutely
just let
would
us
be
know. We
honored.
would love it. Be
Yeah.
honored.
All right. Well, when we're done with here, let's make that happen and plan it.
We might
All
make
right.
that first step.
Or at least a half a step.
Yeah, have a step. But thank you
No,
again.
that
so
would be
much.
awesome.
Yeah,
That would be
thank you
awesome.
again so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
And if we'll wrap everything up, if you don't mind, and then we'll kind of figure everything out from there. All right.
Yeah, just text me and we'll take care of it.
Perfect.
All right.
Perfect. All right,
Thank you,
ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Hey,
Jamie.
Thank
Jamie
you.
Kay
Bye-bye.
again with the Jungle Room
Yes,
podcast.
check it out, folks. Check out our
And
podcast.
This is DC.
And I'm DEH. Until next time.
Keep
Keep
rocking in
rocking
the
the
80s and keep rocking Elvis.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Folks, be nice to
All
everyone.
right. Bye-bye.
Bye.